Hello and welcome to the Duquesne Sports Pregame Show live here from the Union Broadcast Studio at Duquesne University. I'm Jack Morgan. Alongside me is Dylan Pfister. We're going to bring you through tonight's game for Duquesne men's basketball versus Davidson. A big conference matchup. Both teams need this one as they sit towards the bottom of the A-10 standings, but there's plenty of time to recover with almost 10 games to go for both sides. And we're going to start out with Davidson here, kind of talk about the Wildcats and what has stood out to you about how their season has gone so far.
Yeah, like you said, Jack, big defensive battle for sure, and that's how they've had to play their whole season because offensively, Davidson, the Wildcats have definitely struggled big time. They're 15th in total scoring, 12th in team field goal percentage, and they're 13th in three-point percentage. So they've really had to rely on that defense since they're 8th in total defense. That's really helped them out a lot. Now, the thing that I noticed about Davidson is that they actually have not won a game where they held their opponent below 70 since December 2nd. Now, that's big coming into this game, and I think that means that if they're going to want to beat the Dukes, they got to hold that high-flying offense down below 70 points.
If you remember last year's game when Duquesne played Davidson, it actually ended up being a low-scoring, grinded-out type game at the Coop. And Davidson pulled that one out, and it looked like their defense was pretty good in that game. And Duquesne had a tough time getting things going, and it's the same cast of guys for Duquesne for the most part. You got Jimmy Clark, and you have Day Grant, with the offense centers around. It's going to be interesting because it looks like Duquesne's going to be in for a tough defensive battle again this year.
Yeah, definitely. And that might be a good thing for them because you mentioned a lot of those big names that you typically think of in an offensive way. But defensively, Duquesne has really been sound this year. They've been 8th, especially in rebounds as well, 8th in combined defensive rebounds. They've been 3rd in offensive rebounds, so that's been big for them. But like you said, yeah, it's going to be a defensive battle, and that'll work out for them for sure.
Duquesne, now we'll move on towards Duquesne. Duquesne has had a tough time to start A-10 play, but they've really pulled it together, and they have beaten teams. They came close in the beginning of the year, playing teams like Loyola Chicago, teams like Dayton, playing a team like Richmond, who they almost beat at home. And after that game, it seemed like things really changed. They almost beat St. Joe's on the road. Then they came back. They were able to get a couple big wins, notably last time at the Coop against Fordham. So for Duquesne, looks like things are trending in the right direction.
Yeah, Jack, they're definitely they're trending in the right direction for sure. They're on a 4-game winning streak, which is following a 5-game losing streak. So this is big for them. And the biggest part that I've noticed is it's not just one player for these Dukes that's carried them through this stretch. I've looked through all these past 4 games, and it's really a team effort every time. In the 54-50 win versus the Bonnies, nobody hit more than 2 shots in that game. We had 7 Dukes hit 2 shots in that game, and they won. Jake DeMichael had 15 points in the win versus Fordham, followed by 12 from Jimmy Clark and 12 from Dixon. Then in the win versus Chicago State, Grant had 17, Clark had 16, both Drame and Dixon had 10. And then, of course, we had the Day Grant game against URI, where that was just an absolute clinic for Day Grant, and no doubt about that. But it's been a group effort down the stretch.
Yeah, the crazy thing for Day is that 31-point game, not even the most he's put up this year. In Vegas against Santa Clara, he put up 32 in a loss. It's nice to see that he puts up at least over 30 points, and they win for a change.
Exactly, and that's why I have Mr. Day Grant as my Duke to watch for this game against Davidson. Obviously, I don't think he's going to be the key tonight because I think, like I said, this has really been a group effort for the Dukes in this stretch. But last game against URI, like we said, 31 points. He was 50% on all his shots from the three-point line and with inside. He had 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 6 of 6 for the free throws, and we know he's been on point with those all year. Day Grant is 3rd in the nation in free throw percentage with 95%.
And that's pretty crazy. I mean, Day has been reliable as they get when it comes to shooting free throws, and that's something that, quite frankly, the Dukes have had trouble with when they didn't have him playing and closing out games, and especially when they did and when they couldn't get him to the line. A guy like Jimmy Clark, he had a tough time closing out the game against Richmond with free throws and a couple other guys, but it looks like this team is committed to changing that. I mean, after that Richmond game, as I did leave the arena, I saw Jimmy Clark shooting free throws trying to perfect that stroke, and he even changed his free throw routine. But really looks like he's been getting it together. The team as a whole has been getting it together, closing out games, and they're going to need to do that because a game like this against a good defensive team like Davidson, they're going to have to close it out down the stretch, aren't they?
Like we said, these conference play games, it always can get rough towards the end. It always comes down to the very last shot sometimes, so it's really important that they nail those free throws when they have the opportunity.
And I'll move into my Duquesne Duke to watch. And it really, I think, a lot of the energy for this team, it starts with Kareem Rozier. Kareem Rozier, to begin the year, he had a big game against Charleston with 20 points, helped lead them to an 18-point win in that game. But to start conference play, feels like his scoring has went off a little bit, hopped off a little bit, and that's all right. I mean, he's been producing on the court in other ways, hustle plays specifically, but I think Kareem Rozier has to get something going offensively. I think that when he's making his threes, and he did that against Rhode Island, he poured in a double-digit effort. Duquesne's tough to stop, and when they have that well-rounded scoring and the leadership offensively from Kareem Rozier, they are tough to beat, and I think that's who they need to get going tonight against Davidson.
You make a great point, Jack, because like you said, Kareem Rozier's been on that stretch where he struggled a little bit to get on the board. But like you said, good game against Rhode Island. And when he's not there on the score sheet, he's there in soul. I mean, Kareem is just the heart of that team. He is such a leader. I take a lot of close-up photos when I'm doing photography at the games, and I always just see him in his teammate's ear, grabbing him by the jersey, telling him, game planning, being the voice on that team. So he's always going to be a factor, especially in conference play when things can get emotional.
And, you sit pretty close to the courts. I mean, to begin with, it's easy to hear and see some of these changes of momentum in the game. And it feels like Kareem Rozier knows this. And in the press conferences, because he's been there a lot, I mean, he's media-wise, he feels like a leader for this team. And he's talked a lot, about those hustle plays. And Keith Dambrot has vocally said that Kareem Rozier is a big-time leader in the locker room. And I think he's going to need to be a leader offensively tonight for the Duquesne Dukes to win that game. As for Davidson, where are you going with your player to watch there?
Well, you talk about leaders, Jack, and Davidson will be without one of their big leaders, David Skogum, who missed the last 2 games with a foot problem. He's still dealing with that. So 2 of my players to watch for Davidson are Reed Bailey and Sean Logan, both 6'10" sophomore forwards who have been stepping into that role in Skogum's absence. And it's a big role to step into because he's second on the team in points, and again with that size, but it's good that they match up well with him. Both, like I said, 6'10", big guys. And it was Reed Bailey who had his season high 36 minutes against Loyola Chicago. Sean Logan had his season high of 26 minutes against Fordham. So both of these guys are getting a lot more playing time. They're getting more involved in the lineup. And it's really important that they switch them out, I think, because we've said this a lot. There's a lot of guys on the Duquesne team that are hustlers, that are going to make you work for it. Guys like Kareem, guys like Jimmy, especially when they're on defense. So it's really important, I think, for the Wildcats to keep that rotation going in the absence of one of their star players. So definitely look out for Bailey and Logan to make an impact out there.
And as for my player to watch for this game, I'm going to go with Grant Huffman. And Grant Huffman last year against Duquesne, he put up 16 points on 60% field goal shooting in that game that they beat the Dukes in at the Coop. And this year in conference play, he's averaging over 17 points a game. I mean, he's been a leader for the team, and 17 points, by far leads Davidson in conference play in terms of points per game. And he's played a great collection of games, put together 8 great games in conference play. And really, that's where the season starts for the A-10, especially a league where it's really 2-bid league this year, 1-bid league the year before, and maybe only 1 bid next year. The automatic bids are not there, so conference play is huge to get that seeding for the tournament, and Davidson knows that. And Grant Huffman as well knows that. He's been balling out, and I think he's going to have to do that same thing tonight so that Davidson can get their 3rd A-10 win. And speaking of wins, we're going to take a little look at the standings for the A-10, and it's definitely an interesting definitely an interesting draw here. You have Dayton and Richmond at the top, and they are both one-loss teams. And then you look at Loyola Chicago and VCU, and Loyola Chicago in the Ken Palm is ranked a little higher than 110th. I mean, they don't have as good offense, but their defense is very good. Duquesne learned that the hard way. Then you have VCU, you have UMass. Then you have St. Joe's. They're sneaking in at 6. They have that key win against Villanova. They're always a team to watch out for. Duquesne, they learned the hard way the last time they played them. Then you have Rhode Island. Duke's just beat. On Saturday, you have the George Mason Patriots, St. Bonaventure. And then you have Fordham. And then you go towards that backstretch with Duquesne, with GW, with Davidson, LaSalle, and St. Louis in that order. And for Duquesne, I mean, they still haven't played a couple of those teams on that backstretch, so you figure they can rack up a few wins. That starts tonight with this game against Davidson. And, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it goes for Duquesne offensively, given last year's struggles. But Duquesne looks pretty good now. I mean, their three-point shooting, Dylan, I mean, it's a huge difference from how it was a couple weeks ago.
It definitely is, and we can see parallels to both the men and the women's team this year for Duquesne basketball. Both of them started off slow, especially with shooting, but we've seen some improvements down the stretch. And I think you're right, Jack. I think they definitely will fare a little bit better this year offensively than last year, but I still think it's going to be a real defensive battle between the Dukes and the Wildcats.
Definitely going to be interesting to watch. Let's head into our predictions part of the show, and we'll start with you, Dylan. How do you see this one going?
I see a somewhat comfortable win for the Dukes in the conference play, taking a step forward up those rankings. Hopefully, it's going to be 60-52 Dukes.
I'm sure Duquesne fans will be happy with that result. As for me, I think this game comes down to a couple areas. I think it comes down to the three-point shooting. I think that's going to be important for Duquesne. Duquesne has been better shooting the three ball as of late, and that is a big reason why I think they take this one, but I think it's a close one. I honestly think that the beginning of this game, a lot of the beginning of the games for Duquesne so far have been really brutal and tough to watch. I mean, just look at the St. Bonaventure start. Good Lord, the Fordham start wasn't great at all. In the Rhode Island start, they started down in that game for the better part of the first half. And then they were able to get it together, and they started hitting some big threes, some timely threes. You've looked at the emergence of Jake DeMichael, Kareem Rozier, who has been better, Fusini Drame, who started to get back into that rotation. I think Duquesne is starting to find the rotation. Literally, Keith Dambrot enters the post-game press conference against Fordham and says, I think we found our rotation. And that's good. I mean, that's something that Duquesne fans have been looking at all year. They're like, what are you going to do? You have guys like Matus, Horonsky, who's been on the bench, but he's good enough to play on a D1 basketball team. And you know what? He's started to get some minutes, and he's proved worthy. And, I got Mahorchich and Dixon at the center position. That's a lot of depth. Duquesne has figured out that depth chart. They figured out the rotation. I think they figure out a way to win this game, and I think they run away with it in the second half. Similar score to yours, I'm going to say 66-54 Duquesne wins. It'll be a good one, though. It's really going to be a good game tonight from UPMC Cooper Fieldhouse. We'll be there to watch. We hope you tune in as well. And that will do it for us here for the Duquesne Sports Pregame Show. For Jack Morgan, Dylan Fisser, we're saying so long. Enjoy the game, everyone.